I'd like to offer my support for Senate Bill 909, which essentially is the first and integral step in creating a transparent, unified 0 through 20 education investment budget. The reason for this bill is that our current education funding and governance system, in my estimation, is severely broken, and a new approach, a new direction is required to produce better results for students, more resources for teachers, and more value for taxpayers. As you know, the education debate qualitatively in this building hasn't changed much since I was a freshman in the House. It's generally about a large number for one part of the education continuum. We know today that far too many children arrive at school without the ability to fully participate in the learning environment because of a set of risk factors that they experience in early childhood. We spend over $1 billion a biennium on programs for kids 0 through 5, and we simply aren't getting the outcomes we need by the time that they get to school. We know that 1 out of 4 high school graduates, only 1 out of 4, is college ready, and 20% of our community college budget is spent on remediation. At the same time, we recognize that most of the jobs that will be available for Oregonians in the next decade will require at least a technical certificate or an associate's degree. So without fundamentally changing our approach to education funding and governance, it will be impossible, in my estimation, to achieve our long-term objectives of ensuring that every high school graduate is college ready, that 40% of our high school graduates get at least 2 years of post-secondary education, and at least 40% get a baccalaureate degree or higher. I also want to say just briefly at the beginning here that the passage of this bill, or this restructuring or transformation effort for budgeting and governance, in no means is a substitute for a serious discussion about adequately funding our educational system. I think public education in Oregon is underfunded at all levels, from early childhood to post-secondary education, and we do need to address that. But when we make that investment, the future investments in our educational system, we need to invest in a system designed for the 21st century, not one designed for the past. The budgets of early childhood budgets, K through 12, community colleges, and higher ed are viewed not as part of a common interdependent continuum, but as fragmented, separate, competing entities that move by themselves through the legislative budget process. Whereas, you know, funding is based largely on enrollment, which means that the fiscal health of our school districts, our colleges, and our universities, to a large extent, depends on the number of students enrolled rather than on how well those students are served. This bill, Senate Bill 909, begins to move us in a fundamentally different direction by recognizing the fact that early childhood success is the foundation for the educational, economic, and health success of all Oregonians. And by consolidating half a dozen state agencies and dozens of programs within the Early Learning Council, will have the ability to actually identify at-risk kids earlier, get them the services they need more efficiently, integrate early childhood services with the K through 12 system, and measure outcomes to make sure that all of our kids are ready to learn when they get to kindergarten, ready to read when they get to the first grade, and reading when they leave the first grade. That objective alone would have a profound impact on the K through 12 system, but also on our post-secondary system as well. Let me simply conclude my remarks by quoting from a op-ed piece that was recently put in the Oregonian by a number of school superintendents. And they said that it should not be hard to let go of the status quo, limping from funding crisis to funding crisis with a system that increasingly cannot deliver for students, bleeds resources away from teachers, and provides diminishing return for taxpayers. We have the opportunity today to begin to change our course for decades to come, developing a system that gives better outcomes for students, more resources for teachers, and a more prosperous future for Oregonians.
I'm Sandy Husk. I'm the superintendent of the Salem-Keizer Public School District. I'm also a member of the Oregon Education Investment Team. I'm also a member of COSA and the Superintendent's Education Vision Policy Group, and all of those groups align with the support for this particular measure that we're about to go into. I have 3 points. One is the harsh reality of the budgets that we're going to be balancing this spring. As was mentioned earlier, we know we have a revenue shortfall. We know it's going to be very difficult. We will make that work. We will be downsizing our organizations, but we won't lose sight of the ultimate goal of putting in place more systems in the state to mirror some of the successes we're having in the district. The second point is to focus more of the dream of what could be. When I come to a school district, as I did here in Salem, one of the first things you do is ask people what's going well, what's not going well, if we were to look at ourselves 2 years down the road and give ourselves a better score, what would have changed? And in listening in this state and in listening in our district in Salem-Keizer, you hear some common themes. One is that we need to have alignment. Two is that we need to have a really strong commitment to best practices. Three is, as Senator George keeps pointing out, you need to have momentum from the bottom, from the grassroots, from the teachers that are doing the work, from the parents who love and care for their children, and some direction and consistency on policy from the top, from the leaders of the state, from boards of education, et cetera. And when you put in place systems of continuous improvement, you have constant feedback loops, you monitor and you benchmark your progress, not only on student achievement, but on other benchmarks like public satisfaction, input from students, et cetera, then you get a thriving, positive outcome. And I believe that's doable. I believe that it's what we're doing in Salem-Keizer, and I think it's very exciting to think about us doing that at a state level.
In 2003, 5 foundations came together and formed Foundations for a Better Oregon to address major issues facing our state. In 2004, we established the Chalkboard Project with a goal of uniting Oregonians to make our public schools among the nation's best. As the Meyer Memorial Trustee, I remain one of the original members of FBO and of the Chalkboard Project. Chalkboard supports the concept of the Oregon Education Investment Board because of the promise of better alignment of Oregon's early childhood, K-12, and post-secondary education goals and outcomes. Oregon's children will be best served by a comprehensive system that offers coordination and collaboration along the path and better accountability for achievement results. We believe that a comprehensive vision and strategy can emerge from a coordinated leadership structure as proposed. We would expect the quality of our education system to improve and to be able to identify efficiencies along the way. The Governor's proposed Education Investment Board, which is subject to Senate confirmation, would develop the overall plans for management, oversight, and funding for your consideration in 2012. It is important, however, to note that while the state provides the investment, it is the local teachers, districts, and stakeholders who must create and implement the system. Senate Bill 909 is not presented in isolation. It is part of a major plan for revising Oregon's education system. Higher education reform is before you, appointment of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, full-day kindergarten, and K-12 efficiency and enhancements are all bills that help make this a bold new approach to making Oregon's entire system of education and learning among the best in the nation.
My name is Ken Thrasher. I am the chairman of COMPLE and the chairman of the Children's Institute, which is a research and policy organization around early childhood. You know, I think that we all recognize this is very difficult work we're taking on here with these reforms, but I think the governor's leadership in making this happen is really important at this point in time. Because if we look at the power of efficiency and effectiveness, I think that's what we're all about with some of the changes being proposed. And I think the early work that was done in the Early Childhood and Family Investment Transition Report laid out a really good strategy that needs to be vetted further with the work of the proposed Early Learning Council, which I think can then take that work and expand on its effectiveness around early childhood investments. Because today, we do know we have 12 different programs and 6 different state agencies touching these early childhood investments. So making them more efficient as a delivery system has to be one of the strategic outcomes that we come out with. Because we know that if we connect the dots right into the broader continuum that's being proposed, we can do some significant things in reducing the cycle of poverty we have, teen pregnancy, and some of the criminal and juvenile justice issues we have, which the return on investment is significant in early childhood, as you all know, up to 10 times return on investment when we make those right decisions. So I believe that this approach is the right approach. I'm very much an advocate for it, as is Ready for School, which represents 78 business and other leaders in our state that stand strongly behind these reforms and making sure that we make these critical investments.
Senator Haas and committee, My name is Tom Cole, and I'm the executive director of an organization in Medford, Oregon called Kids Unlimited. I was honored to be here, first of all, and I'm excited about the opportunity of hope, because when we first engaged in this conversation with the investment team, I represent a community that's very diverse, a community that has changed drastically in the last 15 years, like many Oregon communities. Our organization has a strong role with the Latino community and advocacy for those kids, and oftentimes those children are at the forefront of discussions in the achievement gap. When we sat last week as an investment team, and I was proud to be a part of it because of the caliber of people who are a part of this discussion, not just highly qualified educators, but people who I think believe in kids. I was excited to drive back and come back to my own community and reflect on how this change as a system would really impact a community like Medford. And one of the passages for me that strikes clear is that we have a young man who just graduated, first person in his family to graduate from high school. His parents had no higher than a second grade education, and he's now at Bowdoin University in Vermont. And the irony was, in discussion of a system, what could change, and I know that Senator George has brought up the innovativeness. We have looked at models like the Harlem model that is a reflection of this 0 to 20 system, and this young man had a chance to engage in a conversation at a college that probably 10, 15 years ago would never imagine attending. And the spirit of that, to me, is about what Senate bill is about. It's about hope. It's about looking at what is right with education, improving upon it, and not giving up that in our own local communities, the things that have worked for organizations like myself has been the connection to private business, the connection to the nonprofit sector, the other variables that play into this larger vision of community engagement, and I'm proud to support this.